Hello everyone. Well, today, as you can see, we're going to learn how to solve equations with fractional exponents. This is very similar to when we solved our equations with radicals in them, right? Which makes sense because fractional exponents are just radicals. So the process is going to look very similar to that. So hopefully this won't be too bad. So to start off, if I gave you an equation that said x squared equals 25, and I wanted you to solve for x, right? The first thing you would do is say, all right, well, I've got x squared equals 25. I need to take the square root of both sides, and we get x is equal to positive and negative 5, right? You just took the square root of each side. There is another way we can solve this, though. How can we solve it using exponents? Well, think about what you just did. Is you just took the square root of each side. And we know that taking the square root of something, right, if we just took the square root, that's the same thing as raising to an exponent. But what is that exponent? Well, the square root has an index of 2. There's an imaginary 2 in here. So we know we're kind of raising each of these to the exponent of 1/2. So what's the relationship between a 2 and a 1/2 though? Think about that. Keep that in the back of your mind. In any case, now we have a power rule. So we have x squared raised to the power of 1/2. That's x to the power of 2 times 1/2 is equal to 25 to the 1/2. Well, 2 times 1/2 is just 1. So we get that x all by itself. And 25 to the 1/2 is just the square root of 25, which we know is plus and minus 5. So we end up getting the same answer. And we didn't have to use our radical to get rid of that x squared. But now think, like I said, what was the relationship between that 2 and that 1/2? How about if I write it as 2 over 1? Right, what's going to be the relationship between 2 over 1 and 1/2? What do you notice about them? Hopefully, you all just shouted at your screen and said, oh, they're reciprocals. Exactly. So in order to solve a problem that was x squared, we had to raise to the reciprocal power of 1/2, which is what you're doing when you're taking the square root. So here are your steps. If we have 2x squared equals 18, the way we solve for x, your first step, and write this down in your notes. I don't know what to say, who I'm talking to, but your first step is to isolate the variable. So the first thing you want to do is isolate the variable. So how do we isolate the variable? Right now we have a 2 with that x squared equals 18. We got to get that x squared by itself by dividing both sides by 2. So we divide both sides by 2, we get x squared is equal to 9. We get x squared is equal to 9. Then, once you have the variable isolated, it's not really the isolate the variable, I don't like that term. It should be isolate the variable raised to the power. But then you just got to raise both sides to the reciprocal power. So raise to reciprocal power. So we just spoke about the reciprocal of 2 is 1/2. So you're going to raise both sides to the 1/2 power. And we got x squared to the 1/2 power. And we know from our rules of exponents that when you have a power raised to a power, you multiply them. And you get 2 times 1/2, which is just 1, or x. And 9 to the 1/2 power is the same thing as the square root of 9, which is just both positive and negative 3. And that's why the answer is plus or minus 3. So to solve this, again, you just isolate the variable, whatever's being raised to the power. Kind of think of that as your radical, where you had to put a box around it when we did our radical equations. Once you have that isolated, you raise both sides of the equation to the reciprocal power and solve. So here we go. If we have x to the power of 3/2 is equal to 27, first thing you have to do is try and get that x term by itself, which, hey, it already is. That's good. So now we have to raise both sides of this equation to the reciprocal power. So we have 3 halves. What is the reciprocal of 3 over 2? You just flip that fraction. It becomes 2 over 3. So we flip it and we raise both sides to the power of 2 over 3. So we have x to the 3 halves times 2/3, because when you have a power raised to a power, you multiply the exponent, is equal to 27 to the 2/3 power, which is just the cube root of 27, and then you square it. Okay, 3 halves times 2/3, that's going to wipe each other out. Anytime you multiply reciprocals, anytime, it doesn't matter what it is, it's going to reduce to 1. Okay, so we're just left with x. That's why we're multiplying by reciprocals, is so we get that exponent equal to 1. So we get x is equal to, well, now you either, normally I'd say take your calculator and just type in your calculator 27 to the 2/3, but we don't have those calculators. I did give you a link in the stream to an online calculator you can use. If you didn't see that, just email me and I will send you a direct email to that link. So feel free to use that calculator to help you. You can check if your phone can help you out, the calculator on your phone. In any case, if you don't have a calculator, then you got to sit and do the math and say, all right, this means the cube root of 27, and that means what times itself 3 times is 27, and that's 3. 3 times 3 times 3 is 27. And then you have to square it, and 3 squared is 9. So that's why the answer to this problem is 9. So I'll end you today with this first problem from your worksheet, which is 2x to the negative 1/3 power is equal to 6. So just think about those 2 steps I gave you. The first thing you have to do is get that x by itself. Right now, just the x is being raised to the negative 1/3, not the 2. So we've got to get rid of that 2, okay? How do we get rid of that 2? Well, we divide by 2. Divide by 2, and we now have x to the negative 1/3 power is equal to 3. So we've got to figure out what is the reciprocal of negative 1/3. Now every year, when I ask for the reciprocal of negative 1/3, I get positive 3 over 1, because you guys are coming from geometry where you're dealing with negative reciprocals when talking about slopes of perpendicular lines, but we don't have that. When you're talking about the reciprocal, keep the sign whatever it is and just flip the fraction upside down. That is it. So the reciprocal of negative 1/3 is going to be negative 3 over 1. Although, okay, so here too, negative 3 over 1. So we're raising both sides to the power of negative 3 over 1, which is just negative 3. You don't have to put that over 1. So we're going to have x to the negative 1/3 times negative 3 over 1, because power raised to a power you multiply, is equal to 3 to the negative 3rd power. So these will wipe each other out. Everything's going to reduce. We have this 3 becomes a 1, that 3 becomes a 1, negative times negative is positive, and we get x is equal to 3 to the power of negative 3. Let me move this down a little bit. 3 to the power of negative 3 is just 1 over 3 to the positive 3rd power. That's the negative exponent rule. That's why it's important to make sure you have your exponent rules down before you get to this. And I haven't been getting too many emails other than, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. You got to ask me specific questions, Okay, so 1 over 3 cubed. 3 cubed is 27. So this is just 1 over 27. So there we go. That's why the answer to this problem is 1 over 27. So to recap, the first thing we did was we divided by 2 because we had to get that x by itself. Okay, so we get x to the negative 1/3 equals 3. We raise both sides to the reciprocal power, and the reciprocal of negative 1/3 is 3 over 1. I'm sorry, negative 3 over 1. And then we get x is equal to 3 to the negative 3rd power, and we just simplify that, okay? And Zeus here is amazed at all this math. Say hi, Zeus. So that was awesome. That wasn't too hard, right? You just take it step by step. You use your rules, you use what you know in math, and you could do this. It's not difficult. Just take it slow. So that's all I have for you today. All right, you can always email me if you've got problems. You can leave comments in the YouTube video, leave comments in the posts on the Google Classroom. I don't get notifications when there's posts in Google Classroom though, so that's why sometimes it takes me a bit to respond. Best way is to email me, and just take it slow. You got this. Please, please, please email me with questions though, guys. Have a wonderful day. Complete the assignment. Stay on top of your work. Stay safe. Wash your hands. Stay quarantined. And I hope to see you guys in school very soon.